Those who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavang, it does. They need me.
Alright, so welcome guys. End of Dragons Daily 67 at last. I mean, it took so much longer than I wanted to do. I think I'm pretty much good to go for recording and producing entire videos on the new PC. The footage in the background today is not necessarily taking advantage of a lot of really fancy stuff with Guild Wars. There's no graphics overlays or anything like that. You're looking at really high frame rates, and you're looking at ultra settings. It will be that from now on. There's no more instability or anything like that. But instead of showing you like Reshade or G-Shade or Guild Wars 2 Hook or any of that stuff, which I've also been playing with, we'll see that in upcoming videos. Instead, you'll notice that the scrolling combat text mod is on. Now, I did a video about that yesterday. If you missed it, I really do recommend you guys check it out. I'm completely in love with the add-on. Unfortunately, it's not getting shown off in the best way in the footage there because no one really came to fight me, but oh, it's so good in World vs. World. You really get such a good sense of the different skills and flavors and themes behind the various professions. I'm learning names of downstate skills that I absolutely have never properly remembered, like the engineer's downstate 2 is grappling hook and their skill 3 is booby trap. You know, this is just fun information to have on screen. But yeah, not many people fight me in the footage here. There's also something weird. I'm actually doing a path through the desert borderlands just because I think it's a pretty place. And, you know, one of the semi-new areas to be added to the game. And the other day I did the hero challenge against the Wyverns up in the top right of that map. Using the scrolling combat text mod, you can actually see some weird stuff going on. That Wyvern speaks to you, first of all, which is interesting. That's basically like a draconic creature with intelligence like we find in Cantha and you might see a lot of in End of Dragons. But in the combat log, it's actually known as like something's pet. It's like a pet pygmy wyvern or something. And I wanted to fight again in today's footage to show you guys that. But you can only do the hero challenge once, unfortunately. So my recommendation to you guys, if you've got the mods, run on in there to the desert borderlands, have a fight against that thing and see what you can feel. Just spend any amount of time in World vs. World. I think will be really rewarding for you all. So let's run through. It's been several days since the previous part, and I've just grabbed some more recent comments. So here yesterday, Max Lees says, "Hey WP, I just posted this in a previous episode, but since you've been doing new PC stuff, I figured it might be a good idea to repost it," and it was. Here's the new idea for a mastery line that I would love. Allow legendary gear to increase in power in each of the seasons of the game. So by that they mean Heart of Thorns, Season 2, Path of Fire, etc. You would have one mastery line per season. One mastery level could be like 1 to 2% and have 5 levels. They wouldn't affect PvP raids and fractals. Even a little bit of extra power would make legendary gear more enticing for all players. It would give players hitting 80 a clear goal if they are used to other MMOs where the gear grind is the thing to do. It's literally months of content, and it would pair nicely with the new armory system. When and if new expansions or seasons come out, they wouldn't have extremely overpowered players because the players won't have done the mastery yet for the new season, but the gear the players have is still valuable. So the opening of this comment, I think, for myself and a lot of people listening, there's a very strong knee-jerk reaction in the opposite direction. You know, Guild Wars isn't about grinding for power as far as PvE is concerned. It's supposed to be somewhat more about skill expression. That said, Guild Wars 2 does try to do this kind of gear progression idea a little bit in certain areas. You know, the fact we have 80 levels instead of 20 and the existence of fractals of the mist attests to a different story. And hell, even World vs. World kind of leans into it a bit as well. So I kind of think it's sort of realistic. I don't know if Guild Wars 2 is definitely a very different MMO and does bleed players because it doesn't satisfy this fantasy. But I don't know how big of a proportion of the lost users for this MMO is that this is a really essential feature to come in, because it kind of does break the philosophy of the game to a certain degree, and I think it would irk and irritate a lot of veteran players, especially the prospect of going back. Oh, now I've got to go back and play Season 2 stuff. I've got to go back and play Heart of Thorns. I think would aggravate a lot of people at this point. So I don't know how well you could sell it to the player base, but in truth, if you're really driving for this, I think you found a fairly intelligent way of doing it. It wouldn't be my first choice, and I'm not necessarily endorsing the idea. The main suggestion I would say is if ArenaNet want to capture those players looking for gear grind, and, you know, that's their fantasy, they need to look at Fractals of the Mists more. Fractals of the Mist does kind of have this cool progression of infusions, and then once you've done, and going through the islands, obviously, and then after that, getting your potions and your infinite potion, and then all the little tiny granular combat perks you can get as you progress towards Fractal God. It is there. It's just it probably needs to be a bit cleaner. They could expand on fractals. Fractals are the place to go if this is really the problem with the game and, you know, capturing those players. And they really need to get driven in there, and it needs to be clear what that progression is. Because fractals has always been a little bit shy of the bar I think it could be setting. But an interesting idea and a nice usage, I suppose, to a certain degree, of the mastery system. Ben says, thinking about locations from the original game, do you remember northeast of the Jaya Bluffs? You went through a cave full of trolls, but you could see a small, unreachable village in the distance. Clever camera trickery with false perspective. I wonder if we're going here. This is really weird to me that you're dropping this comment, because that, to me, is something I think about a lot as well. I don't know why, because the original Guild Wars did this trick a lot of times. Guild Wars 2 does it a lot more rarely. So, people that don't know, essentially, there is an area in Guild Wars 1 where you look over a cliff out at a northern coastline that you can't actually reach. Don't forget, in Guild Wars 1, you can't climb, you can't jump, you're much more limited in where you can move. So the devs hint that this coastline is really far away and suggest that there's a village out there, but it's actually really close to you. They just have a mini village. Like, they're tiny little buildings, they're scaled down, but you kind of can't get a sense of that because your perspective's very limited. So it makes the game world feel really big, even though in truth the assets are quite close to you. And yes, you could kind of break out using Guild Wars 1 Toolbox add-on and fly over there. In fact, people who are on my Patreon get access to some exclusive videos, one of which is a demonstration of the Toolbox software, and I use that to go out to that little village and fly around. You can see that I think the devs had some little animals out there, some little pigs. So yeah, the idea that maybe we'd go there in Guild Wars 2 would be very exciting to me. But this is a very precise idea we've got here. I wonder whether they'll be more broad about it. You know, when you think of Istan in Guild Wars 2 versus Istan in Guild Wars 1, they weren't as precise and granular as we're talking about here. So I don't really, and there's no lore as well, so I don't know whether the devs will do it. It's not like it's a location that's really going to stand out in the developers' minds, right? It's just something, I don't know, I always thought was very personal to me, but here we have a comment about it. Adam here is responding to the discussion we had about jumping puzzles and their seeming lack in Path of Fire. Now, I do want to say, in addition to what Adam's put here, there were a lot of comments on the last part about other little elements of POF that felt jumping puzzly. Like in Vabi, there was kind of jumping puzzly stuff around the Garden of Saborin and stuff, and usually utilizing the Jackal portals, which I think is quite interesting. But Adam says they traded jumping puzzles for mount races for the most part. One movement-based course for another. I'm not sure I really buy that it was kind of an active cognitive decision they made to have this trade, so to speak. But you are kind of right, where POF lost to a certain degree one thing, it kind of gained in another. Mount races definitely are one of those things I'm curious about for End of Dragons, because if mounts are not a big ticket item for the X-Pack whatsoever, then what incentive do the devs have to add mount races, even though they would be really fun? You know, this is just, I think, going to be another one of those features in the game that we would love to have more of, but it takes time and budget and developer enthusiasm for it to happen. Like, look at, we're talking about mount races. Look at the last big batch of mount races they did, the roller beetle races all around Corteria. That is a fantastic update because of what it represents. It represents later developer initiative to integrate new features into old areas of the game. And yeah, they kind of tied it up with the whole Volkswagen Beetle, you know, competition and stuff. But I remember at the time the devs said, oh yeah, we would love to do this more. And it's so often as I'm riding around on a Beetle, not just in Corteria maps, but maybe other POF areas, Living World areas, Heart of Thorns areas, I'm like, there could be a race here. This really could be a race. And even though they said they'd like to do it, you know, they need the time for it and they need the enthusiasm for it, and it doesn't happen, and I don't think it's going to. And I think that same exact question is going to be here for End of Dragons. This is all assuming they don't go big with mounts, but we might get one or two, in which case it does still make sense. We might get the idea of rentals, in which case it makes sense. We might get the idea of like parallel acquisition, same mounts but new ways of getting them for people in the latest product, in which case we might end up getting them. And I'm in favor of all of those. Even just the idea of getting 2 new mounts, I think there's space, guys, I really do. Next, Drakathor Gaming says, I have a few wishes as well as concerns of my own of the End of Dragons expansion. My favorite period of time in Guild Wars 2 was between the time of the Silver Wastes and the lead up into Heart of Thorns, as well as the content we saw in that expansion. I really liked the strong emphasis on map-wide events that map would make them feel more dynamic and changing as you played them. I feel like ArenaNet were taking the game in the right direction from where we started the base game. There is something that was missing in Path of Fire, and that was probably my only major disappointment with that expansion, as it felt like we kind of went backwards. Obviously the mounts are incredible and worth it on their own, and I found it very peculiar that hearts were brought back in Path of Fire, as I always felt those were better suited to the new player zones, where things are kept a bit more simple for people that are learning the game. WoodenPotatoes, do you think End of Dragons, we see a return of the events focused design in the new zones and dynamics, or do you think it'll be more like Path of Fire where the maps are more static and the return of Golden Heart quests? Well, you gotta remember, so this is kind of a conversation we've skirted a lot recently, and you've inspired me. I think I will do a poll on this, because here's the big story here, and it makes me really sad when people are blind to this. People didn't like what Heart of Thorns was doing with the maps at the time. Yes, I appreciate you have this opinion, and that's valid to you. But overwhelmingly, the main criticism and response when Heart of Thorns came out was that the big map-wide metas, particularly because the way that those work necessitates a timer and like a schedule that you have to be on, people didn't like that. They felt like that wasn't dynamic anymore. It wasn't dynamic that all the events would just build into some kind of big meta that has to happen at X hour, and otherwise if you're not online at the right time, it's not going to be happening. And so with Path of Fire, it was really a response to all of that. I think the answer, as always, and this is kind of a cop-out, but I think the answer is to have a bit of both. I would like to see some maps that do the Heart of Thorn style and some maps that don't. And Vanilla actually nailed this, and the Living World subsequent to Path of Fire's actual release as well, I think, has been able to nail this. When I say Vanilla nails this, you know, Ore was kind of Heart of Thorn style. Harathi Hinterlands was kind of Heart of Thorn style. There are suggestions, sort of, maybe the Fireheart Rise was going to be a bit like that, and then it never ended up it. And all the other maps were a little bit more Path of Fire style. So yeah, just a little bit more of a mix, and I think we could be in a very good place. I still think the devs are leery about putting too much emphasis on large metas that clump everyone together, because of the performance criticisms that are born from that. You know, you can be kind of sneaky. The game can be fairly in-optimized, but because you never really band everyone together in these epic vanilla-style zergs, it's not so pronounced, and then that means they can push the graphics and other areas of the engine, you know, so it's more consistently pretty and interesting. I think maybe that was going on a little bit with Path of Fire, but really that's my answer. I want to put a poll up and see where people feel nowadays, because it really it seems like the crowd that complained about Heart of Thorns, either they're not here at all anymore, or they're just not speaking because they're satisfied by the current state of the game. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of weird to say that the POF launch maps do represent the current state of the game, because that's not necessarily true. The Living World seasons following it are a bit different. And look at Drizzlewood. Drizzlewood is Heart of Thorn style. Look at Dragonfall. Dragonfall is Heart of Thorn style. Look at Thunderhead, even the North Thunderhead meta, and you know, South going on at the same time. That's Heart of Thorn style. They've been doing it. The corner event is Heart of Thorn style. Palawadan. So who knows? Maybe that's the way the wind's blowing, and the devs are pretty clear about their decision. The End of Dragons is going to be more of the same like that. The other thing I do want to say as well, by the way, is hearts are not necessarily the counter to open world meta events. That's how you're interpreting it, but you're kind of wrong anyway. Hearts weren't brought back with POF. Hearts were brought back with Living World Season 3, Episode 2. And, you know, there wasn't any fundamental shift in meta philosophy there. Hearts coming back was just so there was more to do, and they refined it slightly with the daily reset. And again, I will stick in the ground on this. Hearts, especially the POF hearts, are really decent. They're really high quality. They're good, variant, exciting, interesting ways to interact and get a little bit more out of that area of the world. Now, the way in which we're rewarded and incentivized for doing the hearts and how regularly we want to do them, maybe there are improvements there, but the actual hearts themselves, I think, are good content. They are with Path of Fire, and I'd like to see more in End of Dragons. Lost Sanity returns, an old name here. I'm always happy to see a comment from. I still maintain that ArenaNet essentially dropping adventures was a bad move, and that adventures with their leaderboards were a fantastic idea for adding to every jumping puzzle in the game. Would have been fantastic. On that note, guild missions, come on, End of Dragons, give us a guild mission update and expand it to the whole game. They have the opportunity with the Steam release to bundle all the living story and the expansions together into one big package, so then guilds could be greatly served with a large variety of things to do. That's a pretty genius idea, really. I think the big bundle is really what the Steam release needs. There's a whole story with the release of Steam and how that will actually tie up with the X-Pack, but that would be definitely a big sell straight away, even though it would obviously then trigger a ton of complaining from other people who had to buy incrementally, just as we saw happen when Heart of Thorns came out and Vanilla was bundled in and so on. But screw all that, that would be really good for the Steam release, and yeah, it would allow them to then say, okay, we know that every player has everything, as long as they're not a free-to-play account, and we can have all the guild missions integrated all over the world. I would like to see a lot of guild stuff as well with End of Dragons, just because the idea that maybe they leapfrog with that element of the game. You know, Heart of Thorns had a ton of guild stuff, POF eases off, and then End of Dragons can add a ton of guild stuff and refinements, again, on the Heart of Thorns scale, and then maybe we ease off. I think that would be fantastic. More puzzles, more races, more bounties, more tricks, everything. You know, even break the categories down a bit. You guys obviously saw I did a bit of analysis about that about a month ago now already. The other thing I would say is jumping puzzles, all of them having leaderboards. What is that for? For beating them fast? See, I think that's tricky because the game's pretty broken. And a lot of the terrain can be bypassed. And, I mean, yeah, you can quite easily fix the portable prototype position rewinder and the whole Mesmer portal thing. Yeah, we've seen them do that in other areas, like with the Beetle races and stuff. But, I don't really know how much value would come out of that. I don't know, leaderboards in general, the PvE leaderboards, there's something missing about them, or that's been a bit tricky. I've never really engaged in them. I think it's the way that they don't display always the people that are above me. So I don't really know what the next time is. I never really feel like it's feasible. I remember especially when Heart of Thorns came out, in Auric Basin, there is essentially a jumping puzzle with the leaderboard. The one in the egg chamber where you spiral all the way up to the top. And that's a long puzzle, but the guy on the leaderboard at the top had beat it in a few seconds, clearly using some kind of fly hack. And he was just there for ages. So I don't know, I guess my personal enthusiasm on this one's waned a little bit, but I can get behind you in general. Lastly, we have Rara, who says, is it possible that the loss of Josh Foreman, who was the creator of many or all of the previous jumping puzzles, that there's not another dev who has that interest? So jumping puzzles, as we have them, have kind of gone away, just thought. No, I don't really agree with this, you know, especially since the Sirens Landing Tower and stuff. I think ArenaNet basically have become a bit smarter than their audience in some ways, with the way that POF was structured. They integrated a lot of what was great about jumping puzzles just around as you're adventuring. But now, because they're not all in these formal designated spaces with these big titles saying go here for jumping puzzle section, people think they're gone. But I think they're not really gone, and I think the devs still like those areas of the game. My recent foray into Final Fantasy XIV has kind of taught me that as far as the full industry is concerned, one of the big value adds of Guild Wars is the jumping puzzle exploration. This seems to be a thing that ArenaNet have nailed better than any other MMO dev. And, you know, my time in ESO is yet to commence, but I think that the devs can lean into that. You know, if they have that reputation and that expertise and they proved it, it would be very folly for them to throw it all away. There you have it, guys. Just a quick, easy one here for today. The topic I want you guys all to wonder about, and please give me plenty of comments on this, is what do you think we'll get next week after the finale? So, I haven't produced a video just yet on this. There is a trailer out. I'll be doing my analysis and talking about it. But 7 days from now, it is the end of the Icebrood Saga and Champions. We're done. And so, we have had a hint that maybe there's some interim content before End of Dragons. But what is this, guys? Are we a week away from news? Finally, is it about to happen? 67 parts in? And if so, what do you think the devs will do? You can take this question two ways. You can give me a comment what you want them to do, or you can give me a comment what you think they'll do. Just be clear, and I want to highlight some of your responses here. We'll really get a good canvas of what the community's expectations are, and then on Tuesday, we will see. You got to remember, like, Season 2 ended with the Easter egg cutscene for Heart of Thorns. You got to remember, at the end of the Sirens Landing release in Living World Season 3, we had the Eye of Janthea vision. Is the Eye of Janthea going to randomly appear again, give us a new vision? He kind of disintegrated and disappeared before, so probably not. What's going to happen? And what's it going to show? Is it going to show End of Dragons? Is it going to show the interim content? Is it going to show End of Dragons and then we'll ignore it and do the interim content anyway? It's going to be interesting. We're really in the calm before the storm. Maybe. That's for you guys to decide. That'll be the topic next time. Give me your thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope this video doesn't bug in any way as one of the first made on the new PC. I'll see you next time.